Please choose from the following.
You're shaking your head, right? Like, we have this, but we want this. How do we merge the two together? Now, we are going to cover both co-opting a style for like a day or a trend or just trying something fun out, but we're also going to have a hindsight perspective and look at what is our fantasy or our romanticized style for the next 10 years and how do we achieve that, which sounds like a lofty goal, but we'll take it step by step. Let's start at the very beginning.
A very good place to start.
I mean, even that little clip probably brought back some nostalgia for some of you because it almost reflects a time where we had like fewer distractions. We weren't bombarded with like scripted TikTok videos that were all mimics of one another, or like constant notifications of bills being due, or like this insane expectation of beauty put on us on an everyday basis. Like, time was simpler then. The social landscape that we're in right now is honestly exhausting. And I think that's why so many people are gravitating towards style systems or seasonal color analysis or systems that worked for people in the past. At least these systems kind of put you on a path, and it at least pushes you in one direction that will hopefully help you find your authentic personal voice. But the problem is that the easiest way to feel disenchanted with your style is to be bombarded or burnt out with information. So then why do our social media doom scrolls or the constant barrage of short form video make us feel so inadequate with ourselves and make everyone else's lives seem seemingly so much more put together? It's like, well, I must be behind because like my life does not look like that. So let's first start with the concept of romanticizing your style, because I think that's a great goal, and I think it can mean a slew of different things for each individual. And this is the process that we're going to get into, because I really think that the style systems helps you put a framework around your style. But what we want to get in touch with is our imagination and our creativity and our unique point of view, because ultimately you have a place in this world and it's beautiful, and the best way to honor that is to take all of your interest, do the personal style mapping, and find those connections, those investment points within your style that you want to tell the world. Who do you want to be? We'll be digging into everything from foundational fashion elements that serve as your style toolbox, habits and psychological hurdles around your style, and most importantly, finding your individualized expression that allows you to trust and embrace your own style point of view. So, what is romanticizing your style? I want us to be on the same page, right? To me, romanticizing your life is about embracing your own life and crafting and valuing the things that are important to you. It's about becoming enchanted with your life again and not letting the adult responsibilities of the modern world cloud your joy. Well, I wish we could just like snap our fingers and be transported into a perfect world that encompasses all of our best fantasies and romanticisms. You know, we're not in a sci-fi movie just yet, so we have to do it the hard way. But let me tell you, it is incredibly worth it. First of all, you need to decide and deep dive into your fantasy of choice. And I know I'm gonna get some commenters who were just about to type, but Gabby, I don't have just one fantasy, I have 10. That's okay. That's actually even better. Sometimes I think when we blend all of our fantasies up into a blender and kind of make our own concoction, that can be when the real magic happens, because that's an authentic point of view. So don't look at this as a binary choice. I have to choose this fantasy or I have to choose that fantasy. Think of it as a real expression, a personal recipe, just like your style. Romanticizing your style is about finding joy in each individual piece and really connecting to the pieces that you buy. And if it's more of a fleeting interest or a trend that you just want to explore, we want to keep our efforts and our shopping budgets for those items low, because ultimately our shopping budget and our larger personal style goals should be one that's very authentic. You can find joy in clothes by trying trends, but we want to keep the bigger picture in order. So if we are on a map and here's where we are and here's where we want our style to go, we can deviate and take the sightseeing route or go a little bit this way and explore that route, but we ultimately want to end up here. We don't want to go so far this way or around and get lost so that at the end we're like, who am I? What do I like to try? Does this even represent me? We still want to stay grounded in our personal style expression, and we still want to have that connection to ourselves, that we understand I chose this because of X, Y, and Z, and I decided not to buy this because of that. There was a great commenter in my Facebook group, which is linked below, who mentioned that they went shopping and it was such a win because they didn't buy anything and their friends couldn't understand why they had that experience, but it was because they knew those items didn't fit my style toolbox. Those items were not A+ pieces for me. And that's where this connection starts to come in. When you don't just look at one system or one piece of advice and base everything around that. You really look at the entire view of your style and the entire you. And in true Gabby fashion, I have a worksheet for you guys to download and fill out when you're doing this process. So this video is bigger than just saying like, oh, I watched your video on the angelic essence and I love ethereal. I'm gonna buy an ethereal dress like this. We're gonna go a little deeper than that. And we're also going to explore how to kind of create our own recipe of fantasies. The worksheets are structured like this. And it allows you to start with 3 separate fantasies. There's spaces for each fantasy. And we're gonna go through 2 of my fantasies that have been ones that I've tried out over the past decade. So you know that I've tried them really, really hard. First, you're going to pick 3 different aesthetics or 3 fantasies or 3 things that you're interested in exploring in your style. And from there, you're going to answer the questions in the worksheets to try to connect a little bit with each one and see if it's a passing interest or something that you really want to explore in a deep and meaningful way. About how to merge some of our fantasies together as well. Quick disclaimer, the fantasies that you choose do not need to make sense to anyone else. These are your fantasies, these are your expressions, these are your interests. They only need to make sense to you. And the reason we're filling out the questions and answers in this worksheet is to reflect from your standpoint if they're the direction you want to go. So, my first fantasy, natural Jane Birkin romanticism with a touch of Liv Tyler thrown in there. Does that make sense to anyone but me? No, and it does not have to. That's the best part. It's yours. What started this interest and why are you drawn to this aesthetic? Was there a catalyst to make you interested in this? I've absolutely adored Jane Birkin for a really long time. I loved her in Blow Up. Slogan was one of like those defining movies for me in my college years. I've always kind of had like an awe about her. I've read her books. I've pretty much seen all of her movies. I've always been drawn to her, and I've never felt like I could connect to her as a style icon in the sense of like, this is an outfit she wore, I'm gonna copy that exact outfit. It never really worked on me, and I recognize there are differences between us. So it's not so much her body type or her outfits that I'm channeling, it's her energy. I loved reading her diaries. I loved how she approached life. I loved her story of how she like came into her own sexuality and beauty, and then kind of like also rejected it at one point and kind of was just like, I'm just gonna do my own thing. I love her unfussiness. So this has been around for over a decade. So I can comfortably say that this is a deeply ingrained fantasy and not a fleeting one. I know she's really trendy right now. I deep dived into her, and I can say that this interest has been around for a while. Long-standing interest, check. Fully encompassing understanding of her, of what I'm trying to accomplish with this fantasy, check. Not a copy and paste endeavor, check. All of these things are good things to look out for. I think Pinterest can be an amazing resource for inspiration, style lines, details. I actually have a Pinterest board here that's divided up into sections. It has videos of my own outfits that I like to share. It has style lines I like, colors I like, details I like. And so when I go to Pinterest, I'm not just saying this is a cool outfit, I'm going to recreate it here. What I'm doing is I'm saying, ooh, this is an interesting element here, and I'm gonna mix it with this pin that I saw here, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of this in because that's how I see all of these pieces. It's like the raw ingredients. We're gonna go to Pinterest and we're gonna collect images and movie clips or quotes or anything you want and kind of create a board around the fantasy that you're going for. It can have feelings, it can be landscape photos, it can be music, it can be anything. So here's my board, which is, as I said, the natural Jane Birkin romanticism with a little bit of Liv Tyler thrown in. And the way I look at this is, what world am I creating around this fantasy? What world do I want to live in that would allow me to have this fantasy? Because we want the complete vision, and we'll get to that shortly. Worksheet, the next step, create that mood board and be creative with it. Stretch your imagination. Don't be afraid or be boxed in by other people's interpretation of your fantasy. This is yours. For the person who has this aesthetic, i.e. not just Jane Birkin in my case, what does their day look like? Where are they? What do they do? What music do they listen to? What do they value? I like this question a little bit, and I framed it not to be what do you want, but what does this person want? Because it allows you to detach a little bit from the fantasy. We want to put the you in the fantasy, but we also want to step back because sometimes we have a little bit of limiting beliefs. See what's possible for your own style and your own relationship with this fantasy. Her day has freedom to it. She doesn't overly sweat the small stuff because her life has flow, and they manage these daily stresses with a positive attitude. Her house is not chock full of every convenience modern man can give, but rather intentional pieces that not only mean something to her, but speak directly to her. Postcards on the fridge from travels taken, a coffee maker they find joy in using each morning, a tea set from Morocco they fell in love with. Simplicity over extravagance, because the things they choose have meaning. It's not clutter or purchase meant to make extraneous tasks more simple. They have a creative job, but still have stress like anyone in the working field. Sometimes their day is filled with joy, sometimes with angst. They listen to a variety of different music, classic to French New Wave to 60s rock. The music is suited to their mood or task. They value investing in things and love. Now, if this seems like I'm describing my life a little bit, it's because I've had a little bit of a head start and I've been working on this for a while, because before I like to make videos about certain things, I really like to live them and breathe them and flush the idea out myself to see what the hands-on experience is like. So yes, that does describe a lot of my life, and it has some future stretch goals for my life that I would like to include as well. So as you're going through the worksheets already, you may start to begin to see, like, okay, this is a deeply ingrained fantasy. I could write 50 pages on this fantasy alone. Or you may kind of see like, okay, this is an interest of mine or a fleeting trend that I'd like to try. Both are okay, but it's good to recognize the difference. Because to truly romanticize your style and your life, it really needs to be a deep connection. Because I want to note that the more I've personally pulled back from like the keeping up with the Joneses mentality, the more I found my own style, the more confident I am in my style choices, and the more confident I am in the larger picture of my life. So that's the goal we're going for. We want to create an idealized version of our life and our style that we can actually eventually achieve. And if you're like, well, my fantasy is aliens, how am I going to achieve that? We will get to it. Never fret. So the next question, what does this person who lives in your fantasy wear? So for me personally, I am not looking at what does Jane Birkin wear and how can I buy the exact replica of that. I'm not going to go out and search for a wicker handbasket to carry around. That bag had sentimental meaning to her. It doesn't have sentimental meaning to me. It is about embodying the overarching themes of the fantasy. If you were to dress this character in a movie, what would they wear? And why? So for my answer, it was easy glamour, or my style statement, which also resonates with this bigger, larger fantasy for me, which is free beauty. When you start to get a really deeply ingrained fantasy going, you'll notice that all of your style toolbox elements kind of start to line up a little bit, or the overarching themes do at least. The next question, do I have any pieces that work with this vibe? For me, yes, I do. I have a lot of pieces that work with this vibe, and that's been a style goal of mine, so I have a leg up in this scenario. If not, how do you recreate the same energy with the pieces that you do have? This is not about going out and buying new pieces. This is not about a dopamine shopping fix where you say, like, I need a Jane Birkin wicker handbasket because that's what she always wore. No, stop. And also a good exercise right here would be to pull two versions of it. So what does the dressed up version of this fantasy look like? What does the casual version of this fantasy? If you don't have the pieces, just start typing it out. Just start writing it out, flush it out, see how you might get creative and stretch your original interpretation of what this, fantasy encompasses. Because you may view the fantasy like this, but after you've written out these worksheets and practiced and explored, you may actually see it's much larger and much more encompassing than you originally gave it credit. Next question, do you think you could accomplish this look better if you bought new pieces? And it's important to look at this as an experiment, but also vet how deeply ingrained it is and how much of it you want to invest your shopping budget into. Because is it a passing trend or is it a deeply ingrained fantasy? That's what we're trying to sort out here. And the next question, if so, why haven't you ever bought those pieces before? This will help you kind of like open your eyes up. Like, why haven't I ever bought this? Is it because this is trendy right now and I'm being intrigued by it? Or is it because I've always been too afraid to try something like this? Is it truly a part you want to explore, or is it something you admire from afar? This is a great one to flush out, because a lot of times we scroll Pinterest or Instagram and we see the person or influencer who has this complete life. And that can be really kind of addicting almost. Like we look at it and we think like, oh, it looks so put together. Like, why isn't my life so put together like that? But it's not her life that I'm craving. It's the completeness that I'm craving. It's the full picture realized. Recognize whether it's a deeply ingrained fantasy. Are you willing to deep dive into this fantasy and learn everything you possibly can about it to get to that fully designed style in life? Or is it a passing fantasy? You just want to feel like a princess for a day, so you wear this dress. Both are okay, but you need to recognize which one it is. And the last question is like, what are your dreams? Like, I know you're like, Gabby, you are not the person I come to for lifestyle advice. Why are you talking to me about big picture goals? I just want to wear a fairy princess dress on a regular basis. Go do you. I'm very proud of you. I hope you rock it. But the reason I bring this up is because it is about designing your life and designing the choices that you make here and having that map so that your style here eventually ends up here, the fantasy, the romanticizing your life, the thing you've always wished your style could be. How do you get from here to here? It's good to think about it in a big picture. Someone asked me like, what are my dreams? And I had to pause and be like, what are my dreams? Like, I would love to have a property in Europe, to retire in, to renovate myself. That sounds like a crazy dream. I'm not trying to make it seem like, oops, snap my fingers, I'm in Europe with a beautiful home. I recognize that's a very difficult goal, and it helps you focus yourself into like, what is authentic to me? And that's what these worksheets are supposed to be flushing out. What is you authentically, and what is a fleeting interest or a crush? Crushes are great, but we don't want to design our entire lives around the crush. We want to find our destination and have kind of a GPS on how to get there. So now when I'm actually styling myself or buying things, I ask myself like, will this further me to my dream lifestyle? Is this helping me shape my style, my look, my energy to achieve this? What am I purchasing? What am I looking at? What am I consuming? What is my style and closet composed of? Does it work for these things? And in an expansive concept. I'm not thinking, oh, I only have to dress like this to achieve this. When I'm thinking of, I could dress like this, I could dress like this, I could dress like this, and they all work for my larger picture dream. It also keeps you really focused. You suddenly have a destination to get to. And goals and specific destinations can be incredibly helpful with personal style honing, because it makes you less inclined to just buy something on Amazon because you saw an influencer wear it. It really helps you like laser pinpoint what you want in your style. And that's what we want with romanticizing our styles. We want to find joy in the pieces we wear. We want to find a connection. We want to feel like there's an investment being made that's paying off. The complete picture can be achievable. You just need to be conscientious of it. And like, once you start to realize this, like the blinders will come off and you'll be like, oh, that's what I wanted. And it doesn't, and if you're thinking like, well, Gabby, my fantasy is aliens, like I'm not going to get on a UFO anytime soon. Remember that this is your own recipe. So if your fantasy is aliens, I want you to deep dive into every sci-fi movie and describe like, what do the aliens look like? What do you like about the aliens? What do they wear? Like, do they have clothes? Are they luminescent? Do they look like avatars? That when it comes to imbuing it in your style, it's like, duh, of course this works. And of course that doesn't work. And it can be really helpful to actually look at like your past, not your most recent purchases. Don't do your past like 3 purchases. Go back to, purchase 5, 6, and 7, and if they fit your fantasy. It's about designing your life and investing in the vision, because the easiest way to romanticize your life is to be enchanted by it. Being enchanted with your life is having value in it. It's finding the story behind each piece in your closet, and it's finding the story behind each piece that you wear and what it means when you combine all the elements together. So the last question is, what might you buy or invest in to help you achieve your more romanticized vision? The more you invest in your vision and the more you find authentic interpretations of it, the more it will feel romanticized, I promise you. Value is a big part about romanticizing your life. Value is a big part about romanticizing your life because it's about finding the enchantment in your life, not someone else's. And this can also be really cathartic because it can help you detach from the keeping up with the Joneses mentality we can fall into. And it can also help you not feel like so much incompleteness if you're kind of in a social media doom scroll. You can now look at someone who has a beautiful life and say like, that's a beautiful life for them. This is my dream. And it's a beautiful life for me. When you find that like deeply ingrained fantasy that you want to accomplish, there's an ease of self that accompanies it. Some of you might be saying like, okay, cool, Gabby, that's great for you. I'm glad it worked out so well, but like my fantasy isn't that easy to integrate. Hold on, I get it. We're gonna go through a fantasy I tried that did not work out very well. Let me go over what this video is going to cover moving forward. First, we're gonna do an example of a fantasy that should have been a fleeting fantasy for me, but it was one that I tried for years to make work and failed. And then we're also going to cover the following. I hope that was enough to have you stick around. Let's get into the fantasy that did not work for me. Gabby's fantasy number 2. We shall title this, Playful Gamine, Quirky, Sweet, Yet Enchanting Bridget Bardot Comes to Mind. So I said in college I fell in love with the 60s and into the 70s, and of course that included some very iconic gamine icons. Even Jane Birkin had a gamine phase, but Bridget Bardot also stood out to me. This like playful, quirky, chic, but somehow enchanting woman. I wanted to be her. That was my fantasy, and it just didn't work. But it was a long-standing interest, so it would make sense that I would try it out as a deeply ingrained fantasy. So for the person with this aesthetic, remember we're talking about what does their day look like? What music do they listen to? What do they wear? What do they do? What are their values? So they would have a quirky home that's chic beyond belief, but with many pieces that don't seem like they would go together, yet do. There's a playful sophistication to their style and home. They live in a chic Parisian flat with pops of color and playful details and unique shaped furniture. They listen to upbeat music that you want to dance to. They value being alive, the energy, the spice of life. If we look at someone like Bridget Bardot, there's a cool sophistication about her, but yet such a youthful vibe and energy. Just look at her in Venus. She's sophisticated and cool, yet there's a sparkling energy and playfulness. What do they wear? They wear what they want. They combine cool elements. They have an innate sense of sophistication and playful energy, bolder colors, yet still put together and somehow polished in their presentation. Have any pieces that reflect this vibe? Yes, I have pieces that are gamine. I went through a whole gamine phase, and you know what? If you look at my older photos, they're okay. It's not like these clothes look horrible on me. I'm not saying that. But I felt like I had to do a lot to make them work. Like I had to do the makeup, I had to compensate here or add this. It was never just a natural throw this on and feel great in them. And that should have been another indication that this was not an authentic fantasy for me. It was a fleeting one. It was a crush. Build an outfit around this aesthetic with clothes you already have. if you don't already have the pieces. So this is what I came up with. And you can see that it took a lot for me to get this vibe across well. I had to do the shoes, I had to do the makeup, I had to do the hair. I can't just throw it together and have it look as effortless as it does on her. So another question to ask on the worksheet is, how do these clothes feel? This felt like a cosplay. It felt like it didn't feel so separate to me that I could be like, I could never wear this style. But it felt like I always needed something. It didn't feel second nature to me, if that makes sense. That's how I kind of knew, you know what, finally, after a long time, that fantasy wasn't right for me. Next is we want to explore, is this a deeply ingrained fantasy or is this a crush? And it can be hard to figure this out, especially in the beginning when you're first exploring this concept of romanticizing your life, designing your style, seeing where you want your GPS to take you. So for me, the kind of gamine, enchanting Brigitte Bardot style was in fact just I love it from afar, but it doesn't resonate with me. And here's where foundational fashion information can help guide you, but it shouldn't rule something out. What I wanted to do is how connected are you to this style? How much does it just effortlessly flow through you? It was an evolution of my style, and I'm happy that I got here, which still incorporates some of those things that I loved from the 60s and 70s, but in a more personalized, authentic way. And it's also helpful to kind of think of the energy of your fantasy and if it relates to your personality, because our styles are expressions of our points of view, right? They're integral to our daily lives. Even when we take a passive stance, we're still communicating with them, which means we're still expressing ourselves. So think about, does the energy of this fantasy match with me? Is it aligned with my values? Can I see myself living this way? Does it match the feelings that I exude? An important question to ask yourself when you're vetting if it's a deeply ingrained fantasy that you want to achieve over a long period of time or a fleeting crush fantasy that you just want to integrate a little bit for a few days, to evaluate what drew you to the fantasy in the first place.
What is so intoxicating about it? How long has this been living inside you? How long have you been thinking about it? Where did it come from?
What is mesmerizing? What does it give you in your life that you don't already have? And I would say that my draw towards this playful Brigitte Bardot type character was this exuberance, this energy, this outgoingness that I actually don't have in my day-to-day life. Like, I'm kind of a shy introvert. But I want you to pause here because this is not about vetting an essence blend. What this is about turning a fantasy that you've always loved, admired, felt deeply connected with, and finding a way to make that a reality, both for your life and for your style. We can do this through our aesthetics, we can do this with our surroundings, we can do this with our playlists, we can do this with our shopping strategies. This is a bigger topic than just, here's a style system and here are the answers that you're going to get. This is about really zooming out and figuring out what's authentic to you from a personal style standpoint and beyond. Just a reminder that the worksheets are linked below. What I encourage you to do is do individual fantasies, and then if two are kind of feeling like they're both pulling you at the same time, maybe redo the exercise of the worksheet with them combined and see what unique, recipe that really just speaks to you. So before we talk about the fantasy that's just like it's pulling you, it's right, let's pause and talk about a fleeting fantasy or a crush or something that's just piquing your interest and you want to play around with. And I want to encourage you to do this because fashion is about joy. So if something is sparking joy, pursue it. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to get so far off our path that we're here, our goal is to be here, and we end up all the way over here. And we spent a whole lot of money on getting here. If you filled out the worksheets and you're like, well, this fantasy is really interesting to me. I love this one creator who does it. I love the vibes of this movie. I want to see if it's a romantic match. Let's test it out. Wonderful, fantastic. However, what I don't want you to go do is use this as an excuse to go out and buy more pieces. What I want you to do is I want you to use this as an opportunity to stretch your creativity, to use your imagination, to take the fantasy that's right here and bring it out here. Make it authentic to you. So what we're not going to do is we're not going to watch Gabby's awesome video on the angelic essence and then go buy this from Amazon because we need it to accomplish this. No. So it's about reimagining what the fantasy is. And I guarantee you, you will learn more from this exercise than you will if you went out and bought the Amazon ethereal outfit that you were considering. But we want to respect our closets and all those closet audits that we worked towards. And we want to be able to fill them with A+ pieces. And experimentation is great, but creativity is better. And I don't want to hear, but I can't possibly do ethereal because all of my wardrobe is black and structured. Why not? Why can't you come up with an outfit like this? This could be a different version of ethereal. Sometimes we get so stuck in what our fantasies are in this narrow world that we can't see just outside that world as an even better world. There's a reason you have these pieces in your closet. How do you take these pieces and meld them with your crush or your fantasy? How do you blend the two together? Don't think of them as such binary choices. I can have this or I can have this. Instead, fuse them together into this. Push yourself. Don't just go on a shopping spree. Okay, the croquis effect. So in fashion design, we croquis. We start with one sketch, one design, and then we try to do 5 different iterations of it, like boom, 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 really quickly, so you don't even have time to like critique it or step back and say, is this even really good? No, just keep going. Put an outfit on. Find one piece in your wardrobe that fits your fantasy. Put it on. Try 5 quick different outfits trying to exude the energy or feeling that you want with this fantasy. And sometimes it can help to like set the stage. Like make a playlist for this fantasy. Find yourself deeply ingrained in it, or make a meal that your fantasy person might do, or do a hobby that this fantasy person might do. Because you're connecting more. The more you personally invest in this fantasy and romanticism, the more it will feel authentic, the more you will be able to tell if it's something you actually love or it's just something you love the idea of. Keep pushing your fantasy a little bit larger if it doesn't work. So if you're a mom who just gave birth to your first child and all you do is wear leggings and you want to look like this, maybe you develop an outfit like this. But it still connects to this fantasy. It still feels resonant. It still feels like an expanded version of this style. Next up, let's talk about the deeply ingrained fantasy. So the worksheets that I had you fill out for your original fantasies are just a place to start. We're thinking about what this person does with their life, what music they listen to, what their values are, what they might wear. We're just trying to get a full 360 picture. But now we're starting to land on a fantasy that really feels at home with us and something we want to pursue. So those worksheets were just a place to start. The next step is where the magic really happens when you're developing an authentic personal style. So it's called the perfect day exercise. It's the next worksheet that you have to fill out. So the traditional exercise is basically like design your perfect day. Imagine a couple years from now, where do you wake up? What are your activities? How do you take your morning coffee? And we're going to do all that, but we're also going to frame it in an aesthetic and style focus. In 5 years, what does your bedroom look like? What do the comforters look like? What does your room look like? What does the house look like? What does your closet look like? Sure, you can include what's your morning routine? How do you take your coffee? Who surrounds you? All of those help you design your life, of course. But we're trying to focus in on the aesthetics too here. What does your jewelry box look like? What pieces do you always wear? Like start picturing this. You could even build a Pinterest board with these elements. We don't want to go too fantasy to the point where you're like, I don't want to move and I'm not moving into a house by the sea. So Gabby, this isn't super helpful for me. So if I have this fantasy, but my house looks like this, you're just making me more depressed. We're not going to do that. It's all about taking stock of where you want to go. Where do you want to take your style GPS and where do you want to end up? Just explore, stretch that imagination. I don't want you to fill out this worksheet and say, but this could never work for me, because that's not the point of this. This is our perfect day. You get carte blanche. Reflecting on these answers should give you an understanding of what you find so enchanting about the fantasy itself. And it should give you ideas on how to apply it more practically. And it should give you be kind of like a guiding light to the choices that you're making with your style and your aesthetics today. And it's also about figuring out where the authenticity comes. I want you to romanticize your style in life. That's why I say take daily outfit photos. You could also try this wonderful app called 1 Second a Day, and it's 1 second a day. It's super easy, but it's wonderful to look back and be like, oh my gosh, these are all my outfits. Like, look at how much I've grown. Look at how much I've become the person that I wanted to be. You guys don't have YouTube videos to look back and be like, oh man, that outfit was, but this one's really starting to hit. So use an app like that to really invest in your authenticity and appreciate what you currently have. And you can also do it with your family or your friends or any moments from your day, because romanticizing your life is about appreciating what you have. It's about completing your own fantasy vision for your style, your surroundings, everything. So the more you look and have value and see the value in your life, the better off this process will be. So you might be thinking like, okay, I built a board, I did the perfect day exercise, and I would love my house to look like this and my style to look like this. But Gabby, there's a problem, because I live in a house like this and I have an outfit like this on a daily basis. That's okay. We're about merging the two together and finding the authentic iteration for you. How do you design your life so that this fantasy and what it's fulfilling for you is more part of your everyday life? Maybe it's that you and your family go visit the sea every summer. And every time you go to the summer, you buy something from that location that reminds you of that trip and that you feel connected to the sea in. It could be something like this and something like this. So yeah, you don't have the beautiful cottage next to the lighthouse on the sea, but you do have elements that feel, this connects me to the water, this connects me to life, this gives me that same memory that I can taste and smell my family being out on a sailboat in summer. We are essentially creating a supplemental map to get you from here to here, and to find more joy and more excitement and more enchantment with our styles, so that you get up in the morning and you just know, this is what I'm gonna wear. It's easy peasy, done. If you're at all struggling at this point and you're saying, like, this is the ideal life I want, but there's absolutely no connections between me and my life and I don't know where to take it, then I want to challenge you to deep dive into it. This is another great way to see if something is a deeply ingrained fantasy or if it's just a crush, because here's the thing. If it's a deeply ingrained fantasy, you will want to learn absolutely everything you can about it. I'm talking about consuming every piece of content you can about it, watching movies on it, making a playlist on it, art, surrounding yourself with art inspired by it. For mine, it's a deep dive into movies by Jane Birkin, the decade that I love, finding properties in Europe that have that natural romantic vibes that I want, learning skills that could get me to that fantasy life. And every time I get dressed, thinking about, could I picture myself here? Could this outfit be pictured here? And you could even, if you like Canva or Photoshop or any of those apps, you could even Photoshop some of your outfits with the backgrounds in mind of your fantasy to kind of see how well you're doing and how well you're connecting to this deeply ingrained fantasy. And if it's a fantasy that doesn't exist, then you need to get creative. Okay, your fantasy is to have ethereal essence. Well, look at all the historical impacts of different periods of ethereal essence. Look at Kitchener's ethereal essence, look at where it came from, look at the different designers who incorporate sci-fi or angelic tendencies, see how they might differ. Do you want to go more angelic or do you want to go more ethereal? What are the roots of those clothes? You know, where do they show up in movies? How are they exuded in sound? Where might they live? What about their house, or what might they value in that essence? It's all about taking it and figuring out a 360 degree. You want to get a PhD in your fantasy, okay? And if you don't want to get a PhD in your fantasy, or it feels like so much work and you just like are like, oh, this is not what I signed up for, I wanted a fun YouTube video, then it's a crush, and that's okay. Okay, next up, this step is inspired by a lovely follower who was in my Facebook group, and she actually was the inventor of this exercise, and I asked her permission to borrow it. She created a Venn diagram with all of her style toolbox elements and saw where they overlapped. And I have permission to share her image and credit her here. And you can see that here is my Venn diagram here. And the concept behind the style Venn diagram is basically to take all your style toolbox elements, all the foundational fashion elements that you're using, and see where the overlap pieces might fall. And this can be helpful to not only guide your fantasies, but also to include a fantasy circle as well and see where it overlaps. You can see that the fantasy that I'm currently working with, the natural Jane Birkin romanticism with a touch of Liv Tyler, works really well with my style toolbox, but my more gamine, playful one was less of a hit and a less immersion. So that can be a great exercise to try to complete. And there are instructions on the worksheets on how to do that, to kind of see how deep do I want to go with this fantasy. So if we look at our Venn diagram and we see that it integrates significantly with our style toolbox and we're really vibing with it, then our budget for it can go higher and we can spend more money figuring out how to integrate it into our lifestyles and our personal styles and our closets. So here's kind of a breakdown on what I would say is an appropriate budget to spend based on how integral this fantasy is. So this is kind of the significance scale. Is it very significant or is it fleeting? If it's very significant, you can feel free to obsess over it. It is something that you should obsess about, because all those influencers and creators who just like magically create and romanticize their life so well, videos that make you, that feel like you're transported to another time or another era or a beautiful dream, they've obsessed about it. Let me tell you, they've lived it, they've breathed it, they've studied every aspect there is to complete that fantasy. It's why sometimes that exercise of taking yourself and photoshopping yourself in your fantasy world can be so empowering, because it allows you to see, hey, that's possible. That could be me in 5 or 10 years if I obsess enough. So if you found the fantasy that really resonates with you, that you want to incorporate into your style, but you don't necessarily know how it fits within your lifestyle, I want you to start with obsessing about it. I want you to deep dive into every aspect of it and find little ways to bring that life into your everyday. Remember, we talked about the lives of our fantasy characters in the worksheets. Start implementing those. Create a playlist around your fantasy, and every time you wake up and you get dressed, you play that playlist. If your fantasy is Victorian romanticism, then read by candlelight. You might laugh at yourself when you do this, but it's a way to connect with your fantasy. It's a way to try things on and, test things out. And when you're challenged and you think, I need a new loungewear set, I need something comfortable, work from home, I'm just gonna go on Amazon and buy the cheapest one I can find in my color palette. Stop, pause, and imagine your fantasy. Photoshop your work from home outfit into that fantasy. You might be thinking like, I'm a mom, I have a mortgage, I have a million things to do. I do not have time to obsess about how Victorians, read by candlelight, or what type of, historical details they had in their clothing. That's okay. And you can just embrace a passing fantasy. So if you followed some of my other videos, one of my shopping strategies is to put a pause button on a shopping impulse and to put it in my wants folder. And now I've actually added a secondary test to that. Not just a week later, does it fit my style toolbox? Do I still want it? Blah, blah, blah. I also add, does this help me achieve my fantasy style? And if it doesn't, More often than not, it doesn't. It's someone else's fantasy style, which is an important thing to start to recognize. If it doesn't, then it's an easy no for me. Now you might be like, okay, like this is like not what I signed up for in this video, and this is like getting way larger than what I thought it was gonna be. But I wanna tell you that it's really, really invigorating to have big goals. And the more you try them on, the more you obsess, the more you like, you know, fantasize and like start imagining yourself with this true fantasy style that's authentic, the more you will feel comfortable taking steps towards it and finding your own pathway towards it and expanding your fantasy. That's an important part too. Really expand your fantasy. It may look like this when you start, but it may end up like this. I always say you don't know what you don't know. So start exploring, start finding the joy and magic in your style. Okay. This video isn't over. In the community tab, I asked you guys to share kind of your style toolbox parameters or how you would like to integrate certain fantasy elements or what you're struggling with. And I picked a couple of them. So if you like this, let me know in the comments below and I will continue on working through everyone's comments in that community tab. So let's get started. The first one, I'm interested in incorporating the sea witch aesthetic into my wardrobe. Cozy, draped, coastal inspired style. My parameters are pure natural kibby body type with classic ingenue and natural essences. My colors are medium to deep, true, cool winter shades. So let's look at the aesthetic I designed around this. Obviously, any fantasy can have numerous interpretations, but we see a coastal home, the fabrics, the breakfast, the vibes, the inspirations, the hobbies. We start to see the full 360 aesthetic. Now, if I was designing an outfit, which might vary from the original poster's interpretation, I would start with this floaty skirt. It works beautifully for the natural essence, has movement, and definitely gives coastal meets sea witch vibes. I like this draped navy top to go with it. It adds a bit of classic balance to it, but is relaxed enough for the natural essence and is in her deep, cool color palette. Then she's at the coast, but likes cozy. So let's say it's dreary and she needs this cool gray shawl cardigan. Mixed with easy Birkenstocks, very natural essence. Add in this natural ingenue rattan purse that also feels very coastal, sea witch loose beachy hair, and a slight ingenue barrette that is directly linked to her style fantasy. Now, we didn't imbue a lot of classic here, but if she was craving that, she could try this coat instead. Now, if we like this format, we can do more of them. Let me know. Topic, I'd love to know more about how to incorporate ethereal when it isn't in your face and body, that fantasy element of elves and poets. I am dreamy by character, but not so much by appearance. I'm gonna answer this one directly and not design an outfit because I think this is just like general, like your permission slip. You are relying too much on the foundational fashion information. If you love the ethereal essence, expand your interpretation of that. Yes, Kitchener angelic essence is part of that, and Kate Blanchett might be part of it, but how do elves and poets speak to you? Why are they important? What is your perfect day that harkens back to the elves and poets? Follow the thread, just keep pulling at it. Find what's drawing you in and how it can relate to your daily life and how you take your style from here to this fantasy element here. Don't box yourself in. And I don't think any style system founder would ever tell you that you can't pursue something you're interested in, because all of these systems want you to express your best self. So if your best self is elves and poets, find that fantasy for yourself. Someone else said, Florence Welch, not just her style, but her home decor perfectly matches her style, natural and ethereal. Okay. She is a great example of someone who has designed her life and done it with her fantasy self in mind. You're right. Her essence blend might very well be ethereal and natural. That's probably what I would assign her. It doesn't matter if it was her essence or not. Like, she's committed to this look. Her music speaks to this vibe. Her house speaks to this vibe. Her album covers speak to this vibe. She's embraced this as her life. It feels complete. Okay. So the more you want to deep dive and like nerd out on a fantasy or like obsess about something, the like stronger your antenna should be going off that like this might be a deeply ingrained fantasy that you need to pursue. Now, I'm gonna mention one thing. So let's say you've tried a couple different fantasies on the worksheets and you're kind of like, I like this, I like this. Do a Venn diagram of them. Create boards for each of them, design the perfect days for each of them, and then do a Venn diagram and see where they might overlap. And see, start highlighting, this part is really important to me. This part is really important to me. I want to blend this with this. And it's about kind of creating your own recipe, a recipe that might not exist in the world currently. Because if you've taken anything away from this video, I hope it's that the investment and value you put into this is what you'll get out of it. The more closely aligned those pieces are to your fantasy style and self, the more romanticized your life will feel, the better your relationship will be with your style, and the more at home you'll feel with your closet. I actually just thought of this. This video is kind of like the part 2 after personal style mapping, because personal style mapping is looking where you are today and where you've been. And in this video, we're thinking about where do we want to go? Where do we want to take this? And I think it's wonderful to do all these exercises because it stretches your imagination, it stretches your possibilities, and then all that information you accumulated with those fashion foundational systems and style systems build upon each other to help you express that final fantasy self. So Venn diagrams are your friend, the worksheets are your friend, and in regards to the next video, someone left a comment and they asked for a video and I thought it was a really good idea, so I want to gauge people's interest for it. But here was the idea. So the video would be a little bit like these videos, like the build your outfits around your style parameters videos, but it would be an evolution of that because it would kind of be like build 5 outfits for me or build 3 to 5 outfits for me for these 3 lifestyle events. So what I would need you to do is drop your style parameters and then give me like 3 to 5 outfits you need. It could be like walking the dog, work from home, graduation, prom, date night, whatever it is. And then we'll take your style parameters, and we'll build those 5 outfits. And you can see how I reuse pieces, how pieces might carry through. Every outfit in our lives are cohesive around those style parameters. And if you want, you could even include your fantasy self in there too. And I could work with that, and we could see where we are today and where we might want to be. Anyway, let me know if that video is at all interesting. I hope it is because it was intriguing to me. Until next time. I'm a weirdo.